The entire village echoed with the beat of the dole. It was the wedding of Kuda Baksha's daughter, Noreen. The whole village was alive with joy and celebration. In this village, whenever there was a wedding in any household, everyone came together to share in the happiness. Noreen had been dressed in a traditional yellow dress and seated for the Mayun ceremony. All the village girls, her close friends, gathered around her. Some were playing the dole, while others danced to its rhythm. Noreen's face glowed with happiness and laughter. Her elder sister Farzana sat quietly beside her, but unlike the others, she wasn't singing or dancing. Instead, she was quickly moving her hands, embroidering something on a piece of cloth. Noreen noticed her and complained playfully, "Sister, I'm the bride-to-be, and yet you're still busy with your embroidery. Sing something at least." Farzana looked at her, smiled, and hugged her lovingly. "My sweet sister," she said softly, "I'm doing this for you. When you go to your new home in the other village, I want you to take this shawl with you, made with my own hands. Whenever you miss us, wear it, and it will feel like you're wrapped in our love. You won't feel alone." Hearing that, their mother's eyes welled up with tears. She looked at her two daughters and said emotionally, "Look at how much your sister loves you, Noreen. She's straining her eyes day and night to finish this shawl, just for you, so you won't feel the absence of home." Noreen looked at the half-finished shawl with joy. It was beautifully designed, unlike anything she had seen before. Farzana smiled and resumed her embroidery, while Noreen turned back to watch the other girls dance, her heart full. Noreen was marrying Zubair, the son of the village carpenter from the neighboring village. He had studied in the city and now worked as a clerk in the home of the village landlord. His salary was decent and his house was well built. But the marriage proposal had come not for Farzana, the elder sister, as tradition usually dictated, but for Noreen. In their village, it was customary to marry off the elder daughter first, but seeing Zubair's education and stable job, Noreen and Farzana's father couldn't bring himself to say no. Suitors like Zubair, who returned educated from the city and worked in a reputable household, didn't come often. So, without delay, he accepted the proposal. Some villagers gossiped. "Why is the younger daughter getting married first? Farzana is just as good. There's nothing lacking in her." But the parents paid no attention to such talk. "These things are written in fate," Noreen's father would say. Noreen was meant for Zubair, that's why the proposal came for her. Hearing that, even the gossipers quieted down. Now Noreen was preparing to leave, soon to become Zubair's bride. The celebration lasted all night. In their village, weddings happened during the day, so after offering the morning prayer, everyone went to rest, everyone except Farzana. While the others went to sleep, she stayed awake, focused on completing the shawl. Noreen, half asleep, saw her sister still working. "Sister," she said, "at least sleep for a couple of hours. You'll be busy all day after this." Farzana shook her head gently. "No, my dear sister. I must finish this shawl. You go ahead and rest." And with that, Farzana continued sewing, love in every stitch. Farzana sat quietly in a corner, away from the laughter and the music. She was fully immersed in her embroidery, her fingers weaving love into every thread. Since childhood, Farzana had found peace in this art. Often she would sit under the village trees, lost in the designs she stitched. Her pieces were so beautiful that traders from nearby towns would sell them in the city, and she'd earn a small income from it. Noreen, on the other hand, never had a taste for such things. She had studied up to middle school at the small village school, which made her more qualified in the traditional sense. Perhaps that's why Zubair's proposal had come for Noreen and not Farzana. After all, Farzana had never even seen the inside of a classroom. Time flew, and by 2 p.m., the groom's party had arrived with full celebration. The nikah ceremony was completed. When it was time for Noreen to leave her home, Farzana hugged her tight and cried bitterly. Then, with trembling hands, she placed the shawl she had embroidered over her sister's shoulders and sent her off with endless prayers. Wrapped in her mother's tears and her sister's love, Noreen arrived at her new home. Her husband, Zubair, welcomed her kindly and gave her a place in his life with great affection. Zubair's mother guided her to a small but airy and very clean room, saying, "Zubair's out with friends. He'll be here shortly. Wait for him." Soon, the call for Maghrib prayer echoed. Noreen stood up and offered her prayer. Just as she finished, Zubair entered the room. It was their first meeting. From beneath her bridal veil, Noreen stole a shy glance and was stunned. He was tall, well-built, with a broad forehead and a radiant complexion. For a moment, she felt a strange pride in her destiny. How lucky she was. Zubair came closer, sat beside her, held her hand gently, and gave her a silver ring as a wedding gift. "Everything I have now belongs to you," he said with sincerity. He lifted her veil and admired her beauty with open appreciation. Noreen was a simple girl. Even on her wedding day, she hadn't applied much makeup, just a touch of blush and some powder. There weren't any beauty parlors in the village, and it was Farzana who had done her makeup lovingly. Zubair kept talking to her gently, sharing affectionate words, but then, slowly, he removed the shawl from her shoulders and moved closer, holding her hands. Just as he leaned in, Noreen suddenly screamed and stood up in panic. Her voice echoed through the room. Zubair was startled. "Why are you screaming? The whole family is home. Don't make a scene," he snapped. His voice rose, not just out of anger, but from fear that his honor was on the line. Villagers and relatives were present. People would gossip. What would they think if the new bride was heard shouting in the room? Seeing his rage, Noreen quieted down but backed away, trembling, her back against the wall. Zubair walked to her, held her hand again, and gently led her back to the bed. Then, trying to understand, he asked, "Did this marriage happen against your will?" Noreen shook her head. Zubair softened his tone. "Why are you so afraid then? You're acting as if I'm some kind of monster." Tears rolled down Noreen's cheeks. She apologized. "I don't know what's happening to me. I don't understand it either." Zubair assumed she was simply nervous, so he tried again to comfort her. He leaned in, kissed her gently, but within moments, Noreen began screaming again. She shoved him away, rushed to the wall, and cried, "Don't touch me! I feel nothing but hatred when you come near me." Zubair was stunned. His mind raced with suspicion. Was it possible that Noreen loved someone else? Was that why she was behaving like this? Before he could make sense of anything, Noreen's loud screams had already reached the ears of his family members. His mother came rushing to the room and knocked furiously. Zubair opened the door reluctantly and she stormed inside, visibly angry. "We still have guests in the house? What kind of spectacle is this?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, filled with frustration. The house was full of relatives and villagers. Gossip had already begun to swirl. Zubair, flustered and tense, turned to his mother and said, "I don't understand this girl. I think she has feelings for someone else. The moment I try to touch her, she starts screaming like I'm a stranger." His mother's face darkened. She turned to her new daughter-in-law who sat weeping on the bed. "What's the matter, Noreen?" she asked harshly, stepping closer. Noreen sobbed harder and stammered, I want to be alone, please. Take your son out of the room." She didn't even know how the words left her lips. She hadn't meant to say it that way, but they came out, raw and uncontrolled. Zubair's mother's eyes blazed. "If you loved someone else, why did you marry my son? Why disgrace our family like this?" Noreen didn't respond. She simply walked back to the bed, sat down quietly, and wrapped her sister's embroidered shawl tightly around her shoulders. She didn't look at Zubair or his mother again. Zubair's mother glared at her for a moment longer, then turned to her son. "Leave for now. We'll talk to her parents once the guests leave." Zubair nodded silently and followed her out. As soon as the room was empty, a strange calm returned. Noreen leaned against the pillow and tried to understand her own emotions. She didn't know what was happening to her. Everything had been fine. She had liked Zubair. Then why had her body frozen with fear the moment he got close? She clung to the shawl Farzana had stitched, the thread of her sister's love now her only comfort. Tears returned to her eyes. What if Zubair's mother really did call her parents? What would happen then? Just then, Zubair's elder sister entered the room. "Bhabhi, what's going on? Please tell me. If there's a problem, I'll help." Her voice was soft, her tone sincere. She was a gentle, understanding girl. Noreen broke down again. Through her tears, she whispered, "I don't know what's wrong. When Zubair touched me, it felt like an electric shock ran through my body. I felt panicked, breathless, but the moment he left the room, I felt calm again." Zubair's sister was shocked, but she remained composed and said warmly, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Maybe it's just stress. You haven't slept in days. Just rest tonight. My brother won't come into the room. She helped Noreen lie down and gently covered her with the same shawl her sister had lovingly embroidered. And finally, sleep came. For the first time since her wedding, Noreen slept peacefully. The next morning, she opened her eyes to find Zubair entering the room. The moment she saw him, anxiety rose again like a tide. She sat up quickly, tense. Zubair didn't say a word. He didn't even glance her way. He simply opened the wardrobe, took out a clean outfit, and walked out without a sound. His cold distance hurt Noreen deeply. Yet, at the same time, she felt relieved. At least he hadn't come near her. Later that afternoon was the Walima reception. Noreen's parents arrived at Zubair's village, unaware of the storm brewing. The villagers had already been whispering. The moment her parents stepped in, the murmurs grew louder. Within minutes, they too realized that something had gone terribly wrong. Their daughter had brought shame, not celebration. When Noreen's father heard what had happened, he flew into a rage. But Farzana quickly calmed him down. Abba, please don't lose your temper. Let me talk to her. Farzana entered the room where Noreen, dressed as a bride for the Walima, sat in silence. Her face bore no joy, only guilt and distress. Her eyes were red, her expression distant. What's going on, Noreen? Farzana asked, kneeling beside her. People are talking. What happened last night? Noreen looked at her elder sister, broke down in tears, and embraced her tightly. Then, sobbing, she told Farzana everything that had happened with Zubair the previous night. Farzana listened intently, then asked gently, Is it that you don't like Zubair? Noreen cried harder. No, he's a good man. He didn't force me, he was kind. But I don't know what happened. The moment he came near me, I felt physically ill. Something inside me just snapped. Farzana consoled her. Don't worry, it'll be okay, she said softly. She then reassured their parents as well, telling them to stay calm and give it time. But the Walima passed in awkward silence. There was no joy, no celebration. Instead, whispers filled the air. Everyone gossiped in hushed voices, saying Noreen must be in love with someone else. Why else would she make such a scene? Her parents, feeling humiliated, quietly left for their village, and the shame followed them there too. Word spread quickly. Noreen has disgraced her in-laws. Soon, villagers began questioning the family's upbringing. Her parents had no choice but to suffer the taunts in silence. That night, again, Noreen refused to let Zubair enter the room. The moment he tried, she screamed and cried uncontrollably. Day by day, her behavior worsened. She would sometimes throw dishes or hurl household objects at the walls. It felt like madness had overtaken her. Zubair, despite being patient, was slowly losing hope. The villagers began whispering a different kind of gossip now. There must be something spiritual affecting the girl. Maybe she's possessed. The elders were called, but even they were confused. Outwardly, Noreen seemed perfectly normal. She cooked, cleaned, and treated her in-laws with respect. The only time she changed was when Zubair came near. Then all hell would break loose. Eventually, Zubair's mother contacted a local spiritual healer. After some rituals and whispered incantations, the healer said with grave certainty, she is haunted by a jinn who has fallen in love with her. That's why she rejects her husband. Fear gripped the household. Zubair's mother, terrified, insisted on a divorce. Within just 1 week of marriage, Noreen was divorced and sent back to her parents' home, bearing the shame of a broken marriage. Her parents were devastated, but what could they do? Even they had begun to believe she was cursed. After all, who would ever reject a son-in-law like Zubair? But then, something happened that left them speechless. Zubair sent a marriage proposal for Farzana. Even Noreen was stunned. She couldn't believe it. Her own sister? But because there was no fault in Zubair's character, her parents quietly accepted the proposal. Farzana was married to him, and Noreen was left to cry tears of blood. Strangely, ever since the divorce, Noreen had returned to normal. She felt no pain, no panic, no screaming, no madness. There was no need for any treatment. She was completely fine now, but she remained locked in her room. She never smiled. She never spoke. And every time she saw her sister's bridal shawl, She cried in silence, remembering the man who was once hers, but now belonged to someone else. Wrapped in her sister's handmade shawl, Noreen now seemed like a shadow of her former self. She would quietly sit in corners, saying nothing, her eyes lost in a void. Her mother tried everything to help her recover: comfort, prayers, care. But Noreen remained mute and withdrawn, her world sealed behind silent tears. Meanwhile, Farzana, after her marriage to Zubair, appeared radiant whenever she visited her maternal home. She would praise Zubair endlessly and often remark that Noreen was unlucky to have lost such a man. Farzana had completely left her embroidery behind, immersing herself in her married life. And when she became pregnant, time seemed to pass quickly, but not kindly. Her health deteriorated steadily. By the time her delivery date came, complications worsened. Tragically, Farzana passed away while giving birth, leaving behind a newborn son and a grieving husband. Zubair was shattered. He had truly come to love Farzana. Her sudden death left him broken, inconsolable. But what happened during her burial shocked not just Zubair, but the entire village. As the gravedigger began to dig Farzana's grave, strange things began to occur. From every corner of the earth he turned over, snakes and scorpions emerged as if guarding the soil. The digger tried multiple spots again and again, but every attempt was met with these terrifying signs. Finally, exhausted and overwhelmed, they buried Farzana in a corner of the cemetery that had fewer of the creatures. But even then, snakes slithered through the soil as if resisting her presence. The incident spread like wildfire. The village was haunted by one question: why would the earth reject a girl like Farzana? Even Zubair, still reeling from grief, was deeply disturbed. Seeking answers, he visited Farzana's childhood home. Noreen's mother was horrified to hear of what had happened, but she too had no answers. "My daughter was pure," she whispered. "She did no wrong." Noreen too remained silent, her eyes dim, her lips sealed. She had no clue why her sister's soul had faced such restlessness. A month passed. Unable to care for the infant alone, Zubair returned to Noreen's mother's house and placed the baby boy in her arms. Noreen, as if woken from a trance, gently took the baby into her arms. She held him close to her heart, the way she used to hold Farzana's hand. The love she once gave her sister, she now poured into the child. She fed him, rocked him, stayed awake all night for him. It was as if she had finally found purpose again. After all, there was no one else left for her. The villagers still believed she was possessed, and even the other girls of the village stayed away from her out of fear. 6 months passed. One afternoon, Farzana's childhood friend Shabnam came to visit. She had heard about Farzana's death and had returned from the city to offer condolences. She and Farzana had spent their entire youth together, until Shabnam had married and moved away just 3 days after Noreen's wedding. Now it was her first time back in the village. They all sat together in grief, and, while reminiscing, Noreen's mother shared the strange and terrifying details of Farzana's burial. Her voice trembled as she turned to Shabnam and asked, "Daughter, do you know of any sin my Farzana may have committed? What did she do?" That the earth itself refused to accept her body. The room fell silent, and then Shabnam's eyes lowered. A tremble passed through her fingers because she did know something, and what she was about to reveal would shatter everything. "I'm so afraid," Noreen's mother whispered tearfully. "I don't know what fate awaits my daughter. If you know anything, child, please tell me. At least I can pray for her forgiveness." Shabnam, Farzana's childhood friend, broke into sobs. Then, trembling, she revealed a terrifying truth that left both Noreen and her mother stunned and speechless. Through tears, Shabnam began, "Auntie, you know how passionate Farzana was about embroidery. Everyone admired the work of her hands, but one day, she used that very skill for something evil." She paused to wipe her tears. When Zubair's marriage proposal came for Noreen, Farzana couldn't bear it. She was the older daughter, beautiful in her own right. Yet Zubair's family had chosen Noreen. Farzana felt betrayed, as if Zubair had been stolen from her, her heart filled with hatred and jealousy. With her voice cracking, Shabnam continued, "One day, Farzana secretly visited a hut on the edge of the village where an old sorcerer lived. She begged him to help her destroy Noreen and Zubair's relationship. The sorcerer gave her a dark spell and instructed her to tie knots into a cloth while chanting it. He told her that if Noreen wore the cloth, her heart would reject Zubair forever. Shabnam looked down in shame. That cloth was the very shawl Farzana gifted to Noreen at her wedding, the same one she wrapped around her with so much love. I tried to stop her. I begged her, but she swore me to silence. It was this enchanted shawl that had poisoned Noreen's soul. It drove her to reject Zubair, to scream in fear, to tremble at his touch. Eventually, the marriage fell apart, exactly as Farzana had intended. Later, Farzana used another spell to manipulate fate once more, and had Zubair's proposal sent to her. She married him, becoming the bride in her younger sister's place. But she ignored one vital warning the sorcerer had given her. Those who perform black magic shall never witness the joy of a child. Either the child will die or the mother. Farzana dismissed this warning, intoxicated by her jealousy and her victory. And the curse fulfilled itself. Farzana died giving birth. Shabnam finished her confession with trembling hands. Noreen and her mother sat frozen, their eyes filled with tears, their hearts too stunned to react. Just then, Zubair entered the home. He had come to see his child, unaware that the truth of Farzana's betrayal was being laid bare. He overheard everything. Zubair stood there, speechless. It was unthinkable. The woman he had grieved, the one he thought was a victim of fate, was the very person who had orchestrated the destruction of his first marriage and used black magic to steal his heart. His mourning turned to shock and sorrow. He turned to Noreen. "I'm sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I wronged you without knowing. I believed the worst of you. Please forgive me." Noreen, who had suffered so silently, simply nodded. It was not his fault. He too had been a victim. Later, Noreen's parents contacted a religious scholar to pray for Farzana's forgiveness. But the scholar said something chilling. "Whoever commits black magic steps out of the fold of Islam. Such a person may not be forgiven unless they repent before death. Prayers may not reach her now." Noreen and her mother wept again. But what could they do? Farzana had chosen her path in anger when she could have simply confided in her parents. If she had done so, perhaps they would have declined Zubair's proposal for Noreen and considered her instead. But now it was too late. Those who turn to black magic will never find peace, not in this world nor in the hereafter. It destroys homes, hearts, and souls. Never let envy and jealousy drive you to evil. Seek prayer, not poison. Seek patience, not possession. And most importantly, never abandon the path of faith.